family as our mother, and I just want to read out her name. Linda Milwater Damaranti, known as the surname Damaranti, skin name Galikali, clan Gambak Peru. And then we've got Chloe Korogol, Okolexpi, known by skin name Kell, clan from Marandir. And then we've got Emily, Raj Kodur. It's sorry, I'll get back to the meanings before I finish. Raj Kodur, Okolexpi, clan Marandir, and skin name Butchen. It's my sisters. And then we've got elder sister Nicole, Banta Ukurachpi, clan Waramiri, surname Ukurachpi. And the meaning of it, so we've got three people here, Chloe, Emily, and Nicole, they've got different meaning. So Kurongoro is a flower, a pink flower that is a bush, or you can see it in the bush and sometimes in the beach along the side, and sometimes it's a bluish purple, like mixed color. So that's where she got her name, and it's part of what I do. And Emily Rai Bakuru, she's named when there's a storm, and after storm you have this nice calm water. You go through obstacles, like for example. You go through obstacles, there's like storms everywhere, and finally when you go through it, you reach your destination and find a peace. And that's where you can have a peaceful life. That's what it means for Emily. And for Nicole, Banta Mary. Help. I need help. Banta. Mama. And Banta, that she's named, she's got named just then. Sometimes, like my grandmother, my father's auntie, she was telling a story about her clan. It really connects to her as well, because there's no difference between Lamamir and Waramir. It's all the same, it's connection. And we have all connection here, so she just recently got her name just then. And it's part of it, Waramir and Lamamir as well. So that's all I can say, thank you. Oh, and the last thing, Nardi's name, Nilnur, is a water hole where you can get all the sources from. So that's the main down there. And she's totally different, she's Dua. It's like mother. So, you're twin, mother and daughter. And then we have
Jodie, Kell, and from Nigeria.
oh, and Linda. So,
Yeah.
please welcome Linda as well to present the presentation throughout this, and hopefully we'll enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yari-chan.
So she'll introduce herself when she was adopted. So
Okay, that's okay. I got skin name from Warramungu mob, Ngapurula, and from Minjalang, Nalwagach. So I'm another Yiricha, like Chloe and Emily. Yeah. Okay. Molto bene, grazie.
My turn.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Claude, for doing that. And Buddha and all the family. Thank you. Yo, yana ga pai mak nungu kuri yana ultima ena. Ulunga Barwick. It's been a huge journey undertaking my other's request to getting the instructions from her to take on the responsibilities of my family. That was in 2006-07, and she helped me with my PhD. And when she saw my PhD, she said, "That's not a book. I want a book like Country by Heart with my other mother." Who passed away recently, Dr. Rhodes. She too said to me before she passed away in December to also make sure that I continue to publish important work so that this generation and the generations to come would have access to their history. Because as Aboriginal people, we have our own history, but colonisation, that history, when it's been documented, a lot of it's been documented by non-Aboriginal people. And so the story or the truth is not always the same as what our people have told me. So in 2012, when I came back from Brisbane, my brother, he said to me, "You have to do what our mother instructed you to do and make sure that there's a safe keeping place for our knowledge." And trying to do that in a very respectful way, I called on support from Linda and Jodie and PARADISEC and Dr. Rose and other family members to help in that. It's not an easy job, as my mum was the last one from her generation, like we old people now. And she's got one sister left, but she's from a different clan. Mummy Yungi, she's Mandiana, but she grew up with us and looked after us. So it's been important for me that when my mum passed away, I was working up here in this building with Nandi and Namamba and Yingia and Larapa and Nandi and Larapa that took me under their wing. And I often talk about taking me under their wing because my mother was her totem was Waibo. Our ceremony is longer, the women is lower. So instructing us to make sure that we had the Wanga, Luka and Chamba ceremony groups at her funeral service, and then for her Nicole, for her final platform ceremony. And we went, oi, we haven't done one of those since 1964 for a baby. We haven't done that before. She said, it'll be all right. You go talk to your brother. And I said, I can talk to him because he's a bit like, well, he's a old brother. He's the boss boy, our old Richard. And I said, I'm going to go and talk to him. She said, and I went, oh. But I've got older brothers and sisters, they can talk to him. She said, no. And I went, oh my God. So I tried to get my brother to come, but he was working, and I tried to get other family to come, but they were all busy. So I rang up Alan Merritt, who's worked with all the Wanga and with Jumper families for many years, from back in the 80s, and spoke to Linda, and they said they would come and help me talk to our ceremony people. And Alan was adopted by my brother, so I called him nephew. And through that relationship and kinship system, we were able to, if I call Linda daughter, just like my daughters. So that worked out quite nicely for then communicating with other family that I could talk to. And so we organised that ceremony. And this is a story in what I think is a nutshell. And I like the nutshell because when I did my PhD, which took 8 years, I've got to show you what a PhD looks like. This is my PhD. I wrote this. And my mum, I had to argue to be on my supervising panel. This is a big thing because it never happened in an Australian university before. So that was in 2002. And that's the book that my mum said rejected because it doesn't look like a book. So then she passed away. She said, you better finish that book. So I did. This is the book that I published. So my mum is there. So that's my mum, Ngoloka, Nancy Daddy. Her father was Jackaboy. Her great-grandfather was Kawachango. And I could go back 5 generations. So it's been a big story. So Clary and Emily Lucky, they grew up with my mum learning Malonga and Marabilla. Nicole, her mummy was sent to Croker Island. When she was a baby, she got stolen from what is now known as Litchfield Park, but from Barwick Creek, I don't know. We've got a big burial ground there. And so Nicole, she knew who her grandmother was. Mum Alabilla, Kirill. But she never had the same relationship and connection that Chloe and Emily grew up with. So it's really important the work that we've been doing to pass on to generations that have missed out. Hasn't been lost. A lot of people like to use the word, oh yes, it's all lost, but I think that's BS. I think it's been taken away from us. And we have to reclaim that space. And that's what my mum always said. You have to be there. You embedding Indigenous knowledge into higher ed core curriculum, I talk about using the metaphor of fire and burning the higher education landscape to create the space for all the willing and to come together with Barwick into that space, into that shared space of sharing knowledge and information, understanding and values that we've been hearing about yesterday and today. So,
Keep going.
yes, please. The archive.
This is for
We're going
Chemin.
to share this now. We're going to split the slides. So over to you.
Yeah, you?
So this is the archive. So this is about PARADISEC. So an archive is a place that has a responsibility to keep documents safe over many generations so that people can use them. And so it's documents like paper, like tapes, audio and video, pictures and books. And the documents are like tracks or traces of ideas or signs of ideas. Archives are about keeping those tracks safe and in formats that can be used in the future. So it's a really, really valuable, and I learned that through going into the archives with Mum and seeing all the stuff recorded and being able to hear the voices of all these people I've never heard about and being able to listen to them.
You might want to tell them some of my reactions to hearing their voices for the first time and interpreting.
Because for a lot of it,
You might have to do that.
for a lot of it, they speak really fast because they can all understand each other on the recordings. So they speak really fast, and I sat there like, Mum, what's happening? Can you interpret for me? But then Mum has trouble interpreting it because it's all the people she grew up with, and we've had a lot of times we've gone and seen it, and we know it's there, but then we have to go and do something else, and sort of gather the strength to go and look at that and listen for that.
I think when we first went to the IAPSIS archives and I first heard my mum and her two sisters and my uncles and my grandfather talking, I listened to the first minute and I just cried. And I cried the whole time that I was there in the archives. And I said, we've got to go. And we're only there for 5 days. So for the first 3.5 days I cried. Every time I went to that place to listen. Well, I'll say that anyway. I can't listen anymore, I'm going to go. At lunchtime on the 4th day, we went back to gather the strength then to start interpreting. And we didn't stop. They had to kick us out of the archive. But the next day we went in and we got lots of this at one thing. But it was so good to be able to listen to their voices, but sorry at the same time. But amazing knowledge that Longima has been sharing with us today, that they left on the recordings for us now and for all of us. And lucky I could still understand what they were saying because then I could interpret for them. We don't have a lot of language left for Maranga or Maranga. And when I go and talk to family down the river, they say, we can't hear what you're saying because that's our language. We don't speak that language anymore. So it's wonderful that we've got the recordings and we're going to share them with you.
Maybe I'll say this one. Some people talk about archives, like archives are preserving language or preserving culture, but they don't preserve anything except those tracks, those traces. And the only way that language culture can be preserved is through active use of those recordings. So those recordings or papers or whatever, they're no use in the archive until people use them. And this is something that I already knew, but I know much more deeply now through working with Pai and Chemin and Ngelebe. So this is what I mean by how Aboriginal cosmologies can transform our practice, our understanding of what archives are. They're very limited, but they're also like a seed house for things to spring up again. So healthy relationships with the communities that hold that language and culture is the number one thing. So that's what we're going to share with you today. Some things about our journey with archiving this collection we're going to talk about. So we just want to make sure that it's easy for people to find things and make it available in suitable formats and make sure that the right people get to find them. So PARADISEC, we're an online archive. We don't exist there's no building where we keep everything. It's all online. It's all digital, and we'll talk about that a bit more. But it was built by researchers like me who were conscious of how important what we recorded was for the families that we recorded, and we wanted to make sure that we could leave those things somewhere they could be used. And it's much, much bigger than just Australia. We've got over 1,100 languages in our archive from all over, especially around the Pacific. So there's over 300 collections from Papua New Guinea, Vanuatu, Solomons. There are 490 different collections that have been contributed, and we've digitised more than, I think it's up to just about 10,000 hours of audio recordings now. So that means that instead of it being on tapes, you can listen to it online. And we'll talk more about that. We keep those tracks, those documents safe to last into the future because the university recognises that that's the responsibility. If the university makes recordings, they've got to look after them. The information about those recordings, that they exist and what some points about them, we make that available so that people can find, the right people can find them. But sharing the recordings themselves, it's up to the people who own that knowledge to decide. So sometimes people say anybody can hear that. And that way we say, okay, people who want to listen, they have to say, I understand, I will be respectful. But sometimes people say, no, we just want to know exactly who is going to listen. And so that means that you can say only people in this family or only people that I authorise are able to listen to this. So you might want to say something more about that. Yeah.
So at the moment, the collection, we've called it the Ford Collection, and we've called it
you want to see what it's called?
the repositories. It's a repository that's
yeah.
that Emily, myself, Chloe and Nicole have agreed to put together with Linda and Alan and Debbie, and Jodie's the special technical officer who uploads all the files. But it took 3 years. And part of last year, so part of this year, to get this far. And we wouldn't have been able to do it without the generosity and our personal time. But the Australian Research Council funded a lot of the project through New Ways for All Ceremonies. And the recordings that we took of for the couple ceremony and for the bunkum ceremony, that was part of my first ARC project, which was about little children and how valuable they are. So it's been quite a lengthy journey for me doing this work, and for Linda and Alan and Debbie in particular, and my husband who's sitting up the back. It's been quite a process in doing the gathering and collating and sifting and deciding what files to be kept and put up. And
A bit like that bowerbird.
and like what you've talked about, all the knowing about all the and understanding and valuing the body parts, deciding what knowledge should be kept and put in that special collection for future generations to be able to access.
Do you want to say something about
So
this?
the Midlunner, that goes back to the PhD. We go back a circle again. Very iterative this conversation. The PhD took so long because my mum, bless her heart, when I was ready to present my dissertation in 2002, I based it around the mukma, the white-breasted seagull, our clan totem. And we were down in Canberra presenting down there at the conference, and I read it to her. It was quite a lengthy document. And she said, "Oi," in a very stern voice, "Oi." And we go, I don't want that. And I said, "Huh?" Have we talked about this? Muddy answered, "Well, like, I've given you this story," I said to her. And she said, "That's from me to you, to your children, nobody else." And I went, "Oh." That was a stern lesson, I can tell you. Because it took me from 1998 to 2002 to come up with this second dissertation paper. The first one I didn't like, but the second one I thought would be much better. And so we're sitting on the banks of the Finniss River fishing for turtle and blackbrin. She's sitting up the river with her sister, sitting in the middle. I'm sitting down here. Fire going there, and Mark's gone up the river somewhere fishing. And is that right, Mark? You're up the river? Anyway, my sister said to me, "Where's all your books? Where's all your paper?" And I said, "I left them at home." Because usually when I was studying, I'd take all my papers with me when we were out the bush. For hunting and gathering. And my mum sang out from up the river. She reckoned, "You can think of something else for your metaphor." So she authorised me then, this is 6 months after the fact, to be able to continue on the journey of PhD. So when she told me no, I couldn't use that first metaphor for my dissertation, I had to ring up my principal supervisor finally agreed to use the midwife because that's the one we use for ceremonies. And we've got a song for midwife there from my brother. And that's how we decided on that. And the process. And so Wurkama is work, Milwana is our name for the plant, and so Baragan Unpipa, burn the groves to bring on the fruit at the right time. So if you burn really early, it won't burn so much. If you burn middle time, you get a little bit more. If you burn later, it's really cool stuff. So depending when we got at the ceremony and how many people were coming, that determined how we were burning for that particular little piece of country where all the sockets were. So we'd harvest the nuts or the muddy kernel and crush them, place them in their paper bark, and that paper bark that grows on the floodplain, that one that's down in Bangladesh. Place in the their and just leach it out. And the water that there. So we go through this process, and Buka and I use the same process for our Aboriginal Indigenous engagement model for plant biosecurity as well. There's a model up the back with a similar process. And so, and we did that over the last couple of years. And that was quite successful. So that's post-PhD. This is post-PhD.
Mm.
So it's shown to be quite successful in its thinking. And then we serve it up. I'm going to jump. If you forget any of those, you're going to die. Because it's full of cyanide. And it's not good, or it'll make you really crook. And at best, you become a cripple because it affects your movement. In your legs. The cattle, if they eat the plant, they get the rickets and go limp in the back and can't move around. It has to be destroyed. So that's this is our region for our ceremonies, right through. So Nucky is where my brother was staying at the time, and my mum passed away at the Darwin Royal Hospital here. And we had this is Bachelor, this is where I was born and grew up. And we've got ceremonial grounds all around there and burial grounds. And that's where we did my mum's mytho, just near Manly, just near Rumjungle Lake there. And all the other, this is where we put the mytho up for my mum, and when we took her down a couple of years later, we leave overseas for 12 months, but because there was other things happening, my uncles from here and my brother from Palumpa, from Paradise, from Moroy, from Naberi, Ulikapuyan, Nadi Nambu and Pepamanari. They couldn't come because they had some other ceremonies on in 2008. So we waited till 2009 to take the Balkan down and put her away in a safe place. And when we did the memorial service, by the white man rule, you have to have a coffin. But we had her in a coffin, and my brother picked my mum up, brought her to Muganba. Once he got to our traditional burial ground area, he opened the coffin lid and brought her to Nunju. And that's the territory government allowed us to close the waterfall, which is Nunju is our name for Wonga Falls. And that's the last place where my mum had her young girl ceremony, and had their mangatu put on by my namesake Payi, who was my grandfather's sister, and I'll just digress a bit. My Chahala Payi, she was one of the first ones to walk the Jesuit missionaries through from Rapid Creek down to Nayanambu with my grandfather, my Tala family. And so we've been busy in the archives, we've found all this information and we've gone, wow, here's all this stuff that all the old people talked about in the Finniss River landscape. And now here it is, we've found some of the documents. And it's just blowing us away. But they couldn't find it because they couldn't read and write. They didn't know about archives, white man archives. So how would they know? But it's really been quite amazing. I think they've found a lot about your history too. In that. So it's been amazing. This is at Mineley, and this is my Attu here, and my husband Ma Chirapit, and my uncle gave him that name, Chirapit, after one of my great uncles. And he, my great uncle Chirapit, used to wear the chili bag. So he was a bit like your brother and you. He was a boss for us. Yalabat, 10 men, Payi, and Mabel and Rosie, I call them Makin, those two. I can't remember how to say their names. They're Maratial names. They're my Maratial relations. Mana was a Marutaban man. And these are our nanas, Dwayne and Willie. So this is Linda and myself and Alan, and maybe Nicole, you might want to say a bit about this New Ways for Us Old Ceremonies workshop at Queensland. So what we did was I organised a workshop to bring all the Makmakmananunga family together to this workshop so that we could share with them the information that we had found in the archives. And Debbie Rose came, and she brought her brother from America, and the Wanga ceremony people from Darwin came, my brother again. You want to say his name?
Yeah. Colin, that one.
Yes.
Yeah, Colin Cabell Ferguson. Yeah.
So he came and he was the boss for that ceremony with some younger people to come and pull the candy and he did the Nangananga. So they all came and that was it. Oh, the one, the Gulbanola mob from Waterloo.
Yeah. Mm.
David Goodness,
Manmaluru.
Manmaluru, Jenny Manmaluru, Rupert Manmaluru,
Jamie Milford.
Yeah. And Renford.
Renford, did he come?
Manmaluru.
Yeah, I think he did too.
And Rupert.
Yeah, Rupert Renford. Yeah. And Solomon.
Ruben,
Solomon
and Solomon.
as well. Yeah.
Yes, Solomon came. And also Reuben Brown from University of Melbourne came. And so we did the workshop and talked about how we could share that information that we've got and use it as a model to start making space in higher education at University of Sydney and University of Melbourne and here. And so this is how we did it back on country. So your turn.
Oh, thank you. So all our family came out on country. So it was held at such a Twin because there was infrastructure there. Everybody came out, and lots of people didn't know what to expect. A lot of people brought their young children. My brother and his wife brought their children. Roy, Isaac, and Lucy, and I brought my son. It was an amazing experience because it was an opportunity. The place had an amazing feeling because everybody was very open and sharing and respectful, regardless of people's cultural experience. So it was an opportunity for everyone to come together. Alan Merritt came along and he shared Wonder recordings with the whole family. I didn't realise the significance of those recordings. When they played the recordings, I looked around at all the people that were present. I saw the emotions on people's faces, and it wasn't until I think I could feel the importance of those songs, even though I may not have necessarily understood. Alan spoke after the recordings and he explained how old some of the recordings were, and there was a gentleman that was sitting near me, family, although I may not know that at the time, he was from Darwin, and I looked at his face, and the recordings that we were listening to was his father, some maybe 25 plus years prior. So the significance of listening to that wonder was very important to our entire family. There was sharing of dance and ceremony. My son and lots of young children, they danced for the first time in their own country. So for us, it was very empowering. It was a very emotional experience, and it gave a very different connection to our country, and it gave a very different inner strength for everybody that was participating. And we talk about things that are archived, and as we know, those archives are no good if they're not being used. So for us now, the work that Auntie Linda has done with our whole group has given people faith and renewed expectation about the future, because our information is there and it's available, particularly for people that may have had interruptions to their culture. So it was truly just an amazing. Everybody, you could feel the energy of the place, and the openness of the different groups that came and shared their knowledge. So for me, when I reflect on that, and I think about what it is to be respectful and to demonstrate eldership, that sharing is what it's all about.
Do you want to say something about this one?
Oh, this is Ella, myself and Linda, and Emily, the selfie guru. Yeah, selfie queen. And this is my Ella. I'm going to say, if it wasn't for her publishing Country of the Heart with us, I was doing my Masters in Education. Just started, and she said she was very encouraging, and my mum and dad wanted her to take me under her wing, and my mum adopted her into our family. She was an amazing Australian academic, one of the best writers in Australian publication. and to be working under her being was just as incredible as experience. Just as it was an incredible experience, and I'm pleased to say that Linda's very supportive of the things, of encouraging and supporting me to do the things that I'll continue to do. And if it wasn't for people like Linda and Jodie and Karen, Emily, Nicole and Mark, and it would be really, really difficult. And to have extended family through Waramiri, it just gives you that little bit more strength to get you through. And working with people like Ruth and Katrina and Marianne and David and Pauline, Nori, it's just adds that much more to your support network to get you through. It means a lot. Because the ground that we're walking on is not always stable in this space. And that's why getting support from other family and other yolngu is really, really important in this space, and from Barwick. So it's mitigating risk. That's what it is. I've got a word for that. And that's what this lady taught me. And my mum, my own mum, she said, you have to be present. You have to make sure that country is looked after so people can come and hunt there and gather there. And that's a metaphor that I use, and that's what I've taught my children. And that's what I teach Maramaga kids. So here we are celebrating Alan Marrett's transition. You can talk about that.
Well, I'm not going to say too much about that, but this was wonderful. This happened in Sydney, and we had Uncle Chicka Madden, who's one of the Sydney elders there, Gadigal man, welcome us onto Gadigal country, and Pai and Emily and I and our friend Sally, who recorded some of those ceremonies, we danced wonga for Alan to honour his becoming a teacher in Buddhist tradition. Yeah. That was last year. And Emily's showing her selfie skills again. I think we might skip over these because it's too complicated, but I think what we just wanted to talk a bit about how all the relationships that happened through that made it safe to put those recordings in the archive. So this is us planning here. And then maybe Jodie can say something about the digitising. Yeah.
My role in the archive is I'm an audio engineer. So I deal with a lot of the technical side of archiving. So here I'm working with reels, old reels. So a lot of recordings from before the 70s were done on reels. And what is happening with the tape is that it is getting old. Real tapes are like elders and we can lose them. So sometimes the reels will have mould on them, and that means we have a lab where, like a science lab, we clean, we've got an oven that dehydrates. At times I've put reels onto this machine, and as you take the sound off it, we digitize it into the computer, the tape actually falls apart. So you get one shot at recording it. the cassette tapes, and with this collection we did quite a lot of cassette tapes. What happens with cassette tapes, we call it sticky tape syndrome, and the tape will not move off the reel. So we have various processes we can do with it, but some tapes you just cannot actually get the sound off it anymore. So I guess one side of my job is technically making sure that we can get those recordings and digitize them, and therefore they can be listened to again and again on through, in our case, through a digital archive. And it's a really special process because it means, when I hear stories like this or working on this project, for me it's very technical. We have a lot of technical requirements and deal with a big load of data, all those hours of sound. But it's actually the personal connections with the materials that bring them alive. And that's something I've learnt working in the archive. So when I first, Linda said, I'd like you to work with Linda Ford on this collection, and it was a lot of paper materials from Debbie, and I guess I started working on that, cataloguing them, thinking what we're going to do with them. But over the past few years, I think I've learned so much about the process needs to be directed by the family and by the community. And it's perhaps sometimes goes slower or differently to the way that I might conceive it. But working in the archive, it's like I feel like it has to be a dialogue, it has to be a conversation. I've learned a lot about listening, and that idea of knowing, I know what I need to do, I know my job, but understanding the process is a different thing. Understanding how we process, how we move through that, the emotions that those recordings hold, that those materials hold. I spent many hours sitting and also feeling that and understanding the stories. It's very important to respect protocol. So, for example, as a woman working in the archive, it's meant that I'm able to work on projects that have women's only materials, and in this case we actually have recordings that are restricted, that it would be very difficult to put them in the archive respecting those protocols if there wasn't a woman as an audio engineer. And if we talk about how the collection looks for an outsider, the women's only materials, you can't even see them. So some of the archive they're written about, so you can read, oh, this is in there, and then you have to contact PI. But some of the restricted materials, we actually keep that. Only people who have the password can see them. So I guess with archiving, it's a process, it's a dialogue, it's a conversation, and that's something I've really learned from this project.
So maybe I'll just quickly take through the next couple of slides, which are really all just about conversations about different parts of the work we do in the archive. Like this is Stephen Gagal there talking to one of our depositors, Michael Webb, about how he wants to describe his recordings. So people from Rabaul, where he made the recordings, can find them. And this is some feedback from Eava Gaeta, who found, he put the name of his language into Google, and he found these recordings of his language and people that he knew, he'd heard about but he'd never met. So he was, this is just the sort of the ways that we can share stuff through the web, because we don't know where people will be necessarily. And this is some people in Vanuatu who are using this new system that we have for sharing things privately just inside a room so that people inside that room can get recordings on their phone, but they don't have to use their data plan, so they don't have to spend any money to get it. This is about a podcast. This is some of the stuff that can be done, and maybe Jodie can say something very quick about this.
Yes, so this is a project that, a different project, but we are creating a podcast where we talk with people who have connection to our collections. In this case, we had a collection come in from the Trobriand Islands in Papua New Guinea, and this woman, Grace Hull, is living in Sydney, just outside of Sydney, a long way from her home. And we took the recordings to her, and once again this similar reaction that you're talking about. When we played the recordings for her, she just cried, because when she left Papua New Guinea, she said she really regretted not recording her father, because he knew the songs. And even though the recordings weren't her father, they were recordings of her village, of songs that she could remember hearing, but she couldn't remember the songs. And we interviewed her, and she, it was amazing actually. She danced. Every song that came on made her dance, that movement through listening. So this podcast will come out in the middle of the year of different collections we have and how people react to them. And they even have to interview.
So maybe Chloe would like to finish off. I'll just say that from my point of view, it's all about relationships. People talk about archives as structures, but really it's all about relationships. So that's how, from my point of view, Aboriginal cosmology has really changed the way I think about my job and about the archive. And I think it's transforming the way that the archive can interact with communities. And I think Chloe wants to say something about what does this mean for our future.
I guess having all the materials and documents in the archive is preserved and it's accessible for future generations. So our children and their children will be able to go and access that knowledge in the case that I guess like from my own experiences, not in the archive sense, but having different things documented. When I was studying at university, I had a copy of Country of the Heart, and when my friends were asking me about who I was and I sort of pull it out and be like, here's my country, and this is what we do, and there's my cousin walking across the floodplain with his kind of little piece over his shoulder, so this is how we took the turtles. And just having that knowledge and that documentation there made a huge difference. Yeah.
Having documents that we can rely on, it's amazing. I've got an uncle recently, I met him at the markets and I was able to read his transcript that his father did many years ago. My uncle couldn't read, but for him to hear the direct word of his father, or for me to read the direct words of my grandmother, and then drive on country with Auntie Linda and other family, and for them to tell me stories, it's amazing. It just confirms. It confirms things, and it just makes all the difference.
So I've been to these. My uncle used to ask me every time I come back from boarding school or from university, "You never know." And I'd say, "Must my mother know." And he'd 30th month. So, Linda, do you want to do this?
Well, I think you should do this part. Yeah, this is right. So this is an image of the page that's got the collection, but if you click on that, it's going to take you through into the collection.
Chloe's disappeared from the toilet. But maybe Nicole, Emily and I come over there.
And
This is quite a historic moment for us. And have you and Jodie come here? Mark Ford. Come and join us. Without the incredible support of my husband, my duo, as with Gupta, as with other family in the room, without your partner support, it's hard to get these sort of things done, the work that you do. So, all hands on top, please. Where are we putting them?
okay, see where it goes to that little white finger? That should click you through.
Here?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't really matter. Anywhere on that image will take you through into the catalogue.
Okay.
We might need to log you in, but just click on there.
Okay,
And
here we
I
go.
hope it will open up.
Here we go. Ready, everybody? Count. 1, 2, 3. Right. Wrong. That one. Oh,
There we go. It should load now.
loading. As you can see, all the files are closed. Now we're
Okay,
Yeah.
so
You can show all 23.
just click on that.
there. We go.
So you'll see they're all closed. We do a colour coding. Green is open, red means closed. So you can read about it. And then in this case, what Pa has asked for, that you need to contact her for permission. Then we put your name in, and then
If you
can
scroll
get
down,
them.
you might be able to see who has access.
Thereabouts.
Actually, it might only be if you're logged in.
Yeah.
You can see
But the
who-
other thing you'll notice here, like I talked about, there was series 3 tapes that were restricted women's business recordings, and they actually don't come up. You can't even read that they're there. They're kept secret. These ones you can read, they're there, and then you can ask for permission. And then if further down the track, because I guess this is a dialogue that we're having, if they decide to open some aspects of it, then this will be green, and it means anyone can open up and have a look.
Well, once they've agreed to the conditions.
Yes, they have to have a password and log in. So there's kind of these 3 levels. One is if you have a password, you can log in and see this. Even if you have a password, if it's closed, you then actually have to ask specifically for your name to go on that.
If anybody wants to know more about any of those files, they can come and talk to me later, and we can have a look at them. How's that?
Yep.
So now we declare.
It open. Have we got a scissors? Yay!
After many years of work. Thank you very much. Thank you. And that's the end of our presentation.